Hi, this is Clark Morrison. Welcome to the UV mapping demonstration of our texturing course. Texturing is a very important part of game development or art asset creation. Here we have some models that I've had for a while, and they have some basic texture ideas, as we can see here with this dumpster. We also have a character model here that I've done. Basic texturing concept. Whoops. Nothing too elaborate. Then I have this just wood plank, just showing some wood grain. Coffee table. And we have an MTLB tank. This was actually from the Battlefield 3 game. But let's look at some UVs here. We have this dumpster. Okay, so I'm going to go into the UV editor in Max. So to do so, we're going to click in the upper right hand corner, and I'm just going to find Unwrap UVW. Alright, and so I'm going to go ahead and open UV editor, and here we have UV set. Now what is a UV set? Alright, so UV set is a two-dimensional layout of the 3D model. So case in point, if I were to select this face here, as you can see, it's selecting this UV poly face that represents this polygonal face here. As you can see, if I select the lid, likewise it'll select its counterpart in the UV editor. I can also make selections within the UV editor themselves. Let me go ahead and turn on the texture so we can see what that looks like. Okay. Now this isn't where you texture it, of course, but this is where you initially lay out the UVs, and we're going to learn the process of laying out the UVs, because when you first open up the editor, the model is not laid out in the UV fashion that we see here. But let's go ahead and look at some other examples of UV layouts. So we have this character here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and click in the upper right hand corner, hit U, unwrap UVW. Alright, so this idea is still the basic concept, but it's just a lot more detail. With character models, it's more of an organic approach to laying out the UVs. Obviously, because the shape of the model itself is an organic form, but there are obvious elements that are more linear, as they can be laid out simpler in fashion. But as you can see, with something like the face, it has to be very clean so that you can texture it properly, no distortion. Let's kind of identify some parts of the model here. Oops. There we go. So that's the arm, the forearm. This is a cast. Anyway, you get the general idea. Let's move on to another model. Alright, so this tank, obviously it has a lot more pieces, and so there's going to be a lot more detail in the layout. But just to really emphasize a point, that it's the same general idea. Okay, so here's the UV layout for the tank. I'll just select it so you can see it a little bit better. Here, let me go ahead and turn on the actual texture for that. It's a lot of pieces. This took a long time to unwrap and lay out, but we're not going to be doing anything this detailed. It's just the same thing over and over again once you understand the concept of unwrapping. At any rate, we're going to go ahead and start our demonstration by working on the dumpster here. So I'm just going to isolate everything. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to assign this material to the object. Whoops, okay. Alright, and so now when you unwrap an object, it is very common that you want to assign a checkered pattern to the object. It basically allows you to see any distortion that might be in your UV, and that'll make a lot more sense once I get into the UV editor. So let me just find my checkered pattern here. So checkered pattern, right? And so I want to turn that on, and where it says tiling, I'll set that to 40 by 40. Alright, I could make it perhaps 30 by 30, allowing those checkered patterns to be a little bit larger, easier on the eyes. Now this is the ideal end result that we're going for. But what I have off to the side here is a model that's not been unwrapped yet. And so this is going to be what we're going to be working on. Let's go into the UV editor. Alright. Deselect these verts. Let me close this here. Alright, so in order to unwrap this dumpster, we're going to just be using a series of projections. Alright, so our projections and max can be found here on the right hand side where it's labeled projections. We have a series of different projection types, but the ones that you'll commonly use will be the planar map, cylindrical map, and sometimes the box map. I tend to planar map and pelt map most of the time. I can get the job done relatively quickly. So I'm going to show you my techniques that are effective and simple. Alright, so I just need to start off by selecting this lid here. And after making all of the selections, I'm going to then do a planar projection to pick up all these faces. Often at times when I'm making my selections, I'll do it gradually and then I'll see other areas that I can also include in my selection. Just makes it a much cleaner process. Okay, so now that I have the lid selected, I'm actually going to include these side faces. And then what we're going to end up doing is breaking some of the vert points at the corners, and it's going to allow us to flip those faces up when we unwrap it. Okay, so I'm just going to go into transparency mode, Alt X, and just make sure I have everything that I want selected. And if not, I can grab it later. I'm sure that'll happen at some point. Alright, so I have that, and then I'm going to hit planar. So right now, just doing a planar projection for me on the Z-axis. That's good. Alright, so I'm going to use my freeform move tool here. It's my favorite tool. It allows me to scale and rotate an object, or rather UV set. Whoops. You want to deselect your projection. So there I can scale the UVs as well as move them or rotate them. Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and continue making selections. See, I think I might have missed one here. Nope. And if you ever find that you get tired of the black and white checkered pattern, let's go back into the material editor. Right here where it says color, you can go ahead and change that. Makes it easier on the eyes, maybe keep you awake. Makes it a little bit more interesting. Find these selections. I often go into transparency mode just to make sure that I don't accidentally select any back faces. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do another planar projection. Alright, so let me just deselect. I'm going to hold shift I'm going to drag it out and hit F2. F2 turns off the red shading. So it allows me to see myself as I'm scaling the UVs. We're also going to be able to relax the UVs here, but I'm going to want to stitch them together before doing that. And so let's go back to the rest of the body. So we're going to start identifying some of the other parts. Let me hit F2 again. Alright, so that's the bottom. I'm going to move that off to the side and give that a planar projection. Tools, relax. Relax by face angles. Raise the amount to 1. Start relax. This is lovely. Okay, so let's see what it just did. And then I'll explain why it did it. It's good when bad things happen because then I can explain how to fix them. Alright, so it unwrapped the UV. Whoops. It unwrapped the UV, but it flipped it. And we don't want that happening. So what we want to do in a situation like this, this only happens in Max as far as I know. We just want to, let's right click, convert to editable poly, X-form, and then you collapse it back down. What that'll do is any modifications made to a model, pulling or pushing vertices, it deletes the history, which in turn clears the model of having any type of weird error or artifact occur during an operation. Okay, so now I need to select this front face. Okay, and I'm going to give it a planar projection. Alright, so right now it's projecting on the wrong axis, so I'm just going to cycle through and find the right one. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to relax it. Saves time from manually scaling it. It's quicker. Okay, just going to move this off to the side. I'm going to grab these remaining edges here. I'm going to find a place for them. So what I'm seeing here is one of these faces on the model needs to be attached to that front poly face that I just moved over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that face and that poly face and do another planar projection. And it's going to automatically weld those two faces together. And I simply need to relax. And that's good. Off to the side. So let's see here. I'm going to attack another part of the model. So these side faces, I'm going to get this situated. Just start selecting these faces. Okay. And I'm going to need this edge. Okay, and this back face here, that's part of the side. Do a planar projection. Okay. There we go. Just turn off projection and move the UV off to the side. Looks like I forgot a face. Alright, so I'm just going to do another planar projection. Done. Alright. Let's see. So I'll do the left side, or the right side rather. I gotta make sure you zoom in, get those edges. Believe it or not, if you don't sometimes grab all the right faces, the projection won't happen properly. Turn off projection. Okay. Move that off to the side. So the UVs are looking good. Alright, so let me grab the back face. Give that a planar. Let's move that off to the side. I'm scaling it down because you're never going to see the back of the model. It would more than likely be up against the wall, so those UVs are not nearly as relevant. Alright, So I need to carefully select these top faces. I'll just do that. I just want to make sure I have all the selections that I need. Transparency mode is excellent for this. It'll show you what you need to have selected and what you don't need selected. Alright. Relax that. Turn off projection. And the bottom face, same with the back. We could scale it down because it's going to receive a really small texture. Super tiny texture. So let's see what piece is this. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly just scale this into this face that it belongs to save myself some time packing the UVs later. Now I'm just simply holding Shift and Control when I'm doing the scaling. If you don't hold Shift and Control, it'll do like a global scale. But notice when I scale it, it's doing so from a corner. And so that isolates the scaling. It's a nice tool. So I'm just going to check out my UVs, make sure everything is matched up. Alright. And so I have these pieces here. I need to figure out where they go. Alright, so I selected too much and not enough in certain instances. So I need to adjust my selection. Okay. This is the error. So I'm going to deselect it in the UV editor. Alright. Whoops, got to turn off projection. Okay. Now deselect, you want to hold Control. There we go. So now that I have that selected, I give it a planar projection, and that'll just group the UVs together. And then from here, I will then separate them. I'm going to group the UVs on the right side as well. You want to be organized. Okay. All right. So I'm going to detach the interior of this piece from the rest of the model. And I'm going to do that just by right-clicking and selecting Break. And I'm going to move that off to the side. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to define a seam. Now the seam is going to break the edge in the UV set, which in turn will allow the UV faces to be unraveled relatively easily. Do that with the relax. Now it gave me an error, so I'm simply going to manually unwrap it. So I'm going to select that face, give it a planar projection or break, and I'll unwrap the rest with the relax. And then I'm going to stitch them together. I need to go into edge mode. Let me turn off the group selection. Alright, right click, stitch selected. Okay. So I'm going to go back into face mode. Alright, I'm going to grab these faces. And I'm going to grab the back faces as well. break. So I'm going to zoom in and turn off the red view, F2. All right, I tried to relax it. That didn't work. So I'm going to planar map it again. Now, the relax doesn't always work. So in this situation, I'm just going to have to scale it. Not that way. But scale it up. And as you can see, the UVs are now not as distorted. Let me just move this off to the side. Alright, so now I just have these faces here, and I'll be able to relax this with ease. Done. And so I'm going to scale it up. And so I'm going to start stitching these pieces back together. Okay. Scale that down. Alright, so I'm going to go into edge mode. I got to turn off that group selection. Alright, so in edge mode, right click, stitch selected. You go into the dialog box, you adjust the bias, and that will conform that UV shape back to the size it was. Now I'm going to stitch this one. Now look, we have a problem. It's overlapping, so I need to cancel, and I'm going to use the mirror tool to flip the UVs. So I have it selected. This icon here, that's the mirror tool. Now it's flipped. It remembers my selection. Stitch selected. I hit OK. Okay. So I'm going to move this off. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Alright, have the interior selected. Break, move that off to the side. Break that face, relax it. Give that a relax. Alright, so I have this here. And you know, I'm thinking it'll take me less time if I leave this selected and I deselect this here. Less time, less clicks. Alright, so with that selected, I just need to break that. Move that off. Alright, and now just scale. There we go. Alright, so now with this piece here, I just give that a relax. Quick and easy. And everything else now just needs to be stitched together again. Do the back end. We're going to get the same error, but we now know how to handle it. Cancel. Select, mirror, edge mode, stitch selected. Okay. I'm going to scale this up. Just stitch these UVs together. There we are. Okay. Now I'm just needing to make some minor adjustments here before I actually start packing the UVs. Okay. So now when I'm actually packing the UVs, I do so based on priority of the object. So the front face here is the most visible of the surface, and so I'm going to start with that. And everything is going to change eventually, but again, you want to prioritize. So this has to be the largest face. It takes up the most space in the UV. And you also want to make sure you're utilizing that space. So I zoom in and make sure it's right at that edge. You don't want it to be over the edge. When I was working on Battlefield 2, they were very, very particular about how we unwrapped our objects because they wanted maximum quality. And so the notion of having to zoom in and making sure everything was perfect has more or less been ingrained in me now, but I've only found it benefits me throughout my career. And now I can teach it to you. Alright, so now I'm going to start fitting some of these shapes into themselves. So you see that square opening there. I'm going to fit this piece into that. You don't ever want to waste UV space, especially with an object like this where the shape itself, that's where it fits on the model. You'd be wasting space to just leave it open when you can fit that the shell in that space and include that in your texture. Okay, and with this piece I'm just gonna scale it down so it just fits in between those little handle looking UVs. Right there, that's your home. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing with this piece here. Just scale it down. And then once I scale it down, I always try to see where I can get away with scaling it back up. Okay. So now I'm going to start packing these as well. Alright, so in order to fit this all properly, I'm going to need to flip one of these UVs. So the one that's outside of the UV set, I'm going to end up flipping. Whoops, left one piece behind. Alright, so now we're just going to hit the mirror button. There we go. And I'm going to scale these down because right now they're larger than that face, but now they're the right size. So I'll just bring in the lid, and I'll also then scale that down. That's perfect. Select the whole UV set, scale it down a little bit, thus giving me room to scale up other pieces like the lid. It's a constant back and forth of adjustments. Packing UVs is an art form in itself, but the more you do it, the better practice you get, less headaches. And for these pieces here, they can just go off to the side. Not a big deal. I'm just going to rearrange them a little bit just to make it aesthetically pleasing to me. I otherwise could have left the smaller piece at the bottom and just left it as such. But there you go. Packed UVs. Unwrapped model. So at this point, what you would want to do, you would then export the UVs into a JPEG file or TIFF file. You do that in Max. You hit render UV template. Okay. And it will then generate an image file for you, and then you can save it out into whatever format. I typically use JPEG or TIFFs. You simply select the black value in Photoshop and delete it, create a new layer, and start texturing. Thanks for watching.